21st City Council Committee of the Whole meeting, review of the 2022 to 2026 Capital Improvements Program and 2022 capital borrowing. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Groupie?
Here.
Alder Wood?
Here.
Alder Core?
Here.
Alder Thomas?
Here.
Alder Goforth?
Here. But I realize I don't have a mic, so hopefully you can hear me.
You can have my
this
Mayor O'Connor?
here.
Alder Moore is excused.
I don't know if this is. Should we each move one down?
But the mic is right next to Molly's left hand.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Not an intentional sabotage. Molly needs 3 mics.
Are we all good?
I don't have a very loud
We are.
vocal volume.
We're good.
Okay, we will continue with our review of the proposed capital budget. And first up is Parks, Recreation, Community Center, and Pool. Jake Anderson is with us from, where are you, Jake? Nashville or something? Is that?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
go with that. Yes.
Okay.
From Nashville at our National Park and Rec Conference. Thank you for having me. We'll start with parks, if that's okay with everyone.
Yep. This starts on page 82.
Yep. So our capital budget was recommended by the Parks and Recreation Board. This year focuses on some equipment replacement and tree projects. So first off is our wide area mower replacement. In your packet, you can see would be replacing an existing 6-foot mower with a wide area mower. This is needed for a couple reasons. Basically, we have 2 large mowers, 3 small mowers. We can mow and trim the entire system in about 2 days right now with our existing staff. With the addition of properties over the last couple of years, having a 3rd wide area mower will reduce the amount of time to about 1.5 days. So that equates to approximately 24 staff hours that can be allocated for different duties. Doesn't take into consideration if one of the larger mowers have downtimes, then it takes longer. So priorities of the department are always to make sure our restrooms are clean, taken care of, and that our parks are being mowed. It has a compounding effect when we can't mow efficiently in the system. So this would increase the efficiency and also allow for staff to take care of other duties in the absence of adding additional full-time or seasonal staff.
Any questions about that? Okay.
Okay, next project is park sign replacement. So congratulations, over the last decade we've been systematically replacing the old wooden routed signs with a nicer aesthetic that we have matching the system. So we have 3 parks left to take care of: Waterman Way Park, 2 park signs at Winnequa Park, and then 2 at 3 Meadows we're proposing. So these will be the same style that we have everywhere else, and then we'll be done.
Big Jake, is Dale Ganser closing his shop? Is that part of the reason I decided to
Correct.
keep this in?
He is closing his shop, and we do believe that he will be able to take care of these last signs for us.
Yes, no questions?
Okay. The next one is kind of 2 projects. We'll just talk a little bit about it. Last night you had the resolution to apply for a DNR Urban Forestry Grant. This would be removing ash trees in Winnequa Park and a replanting plan along with some public education components, including the construction and installation of a solar kiln that helps dry the wood a little bit faster than air drying and be able to repurpose it quicker. So approximately 45 trees. We've taken a couple down, recently 4 along the walking path behind the pool, so we're probably about 40 trees that are in various stages of decline due to the emerald ash borer. Given that it's our most heavily used park, a lot of them in sensitive areas around the playground, shelter, etc. This project would use our traditional $25,000 that we have for tree removals and replanting, and coupling it with staff time that we can use in the grant, assuming that we get the grant, that we can add in approximately the same number of trees in 1 calendar year.
I guess you can continue.
Okay. Next one, ADA transition plan. So this is a result of the 2010 federal law regarding the ADA Title II. We have not completed this part of the transition plan yet. This would be reviewing all of the projects to make sure they adhere to the ADA and then provide suggestions and implementation plan on any fixes that need to be done within the park system. In your packet, I did include a link to the City of Stoughton's plan. It's quite a lengthy, long plan. This is one that we cannot do in-house effectively. And we have used Civmic, our insurance carrier, before. They did not offer that service. They did recommend that we move forward with this transition plan.
Did you tell me, Jake, that there are some communities that have been cited because they don't have these plans?
Yeah, correct. So the first step, if there is, it's through the Department of Justice. So if there's a claim from one of our residents or visitors about one of our facilities not meeting the ADA law, that is the first thing that they'll go to is that you have an approved transition plan on file. If you do, even if you don't have the action corrected, you're okay. You just have to have the plan that shows that, yes, we have identified this as a deficiency and we have it scheduled in the works in the future. So we've had cities in Wisconsin that have gone through that process, and there's significant fines, and then you have to take care of the problem right away there.
Yes, you can continue.
Okay. Next one is a utility trailer purchase. So with the amount of equipment that we have, especially for the Bank River Rink installation, taking it out each year, we use a smaller utility trailer currently that's used every day for brush collection, moving of picnic tables, etc. This is a little bit larger of a trailer that can handle our equipment, so our large mowers, we don't always have to drive them around town, our tool cat, etc. So we do borrow public works trailers as needed, but sometimes with scheduling, having a dedicated one for the Parks Department would be beneficial.
Okay, continue.
Okay. Next one, Fireman's Park shelter bike rack and pad. A goal, sustainability goal is to be able to add bike racks to all of our park systems. We currently do not have a bike rack at Fireman's. Given that it's our biggest summer camp location for kids and also for our youth sports, spring and fall, soccer, flag football, having a bike rack and pad there would meet our sustainability goals.
And would you confirm that you already have a shed that you can place on the concrete
We
pad?
do,
that you asked
yeah.
for?
We have an existing storage shed for our youth sports and our summer camp program.
Okay.
I have a question.
Jake, or Doug, sorry.
I believe the number that the Parks Board had approved was 15,000, and the mayor had reduced that to 5. Wonder if you had any concerns about that.
I do. I don't think we can do it for 5,000 to the scale that we were hoping to. This project would involve a curb cut out of the entry drive into the facility, a walk path up to the Barry Johnson Memorial, and then connecting into the bike rack. So for 5,000, we can just do a simple bike rack pad, even with staff. So if it's an issue of funding for this year, I'd probably just as soon push it off for another year.
I cut that because I was not told that it involved all this other stuff. All that I was told was bike racks and a concrete pad for a shed that you already had. So I didn't realize about the curb cut and the sidewalk and all that. So if you'd like to add that back in, Doug, that's fine. But I think we need to provide a little more information with these requests, I guess. Any other questions? Alder Thomas?
Jake, I'm sure no surprise to you, I'm getting a lot of heat about when and if we're going to ever repair and restain the gazebo. I mean, it really is an embarrassment. And I thought we were going to do it by the 4th of July. But that didn't happen. So can you tell me what the status is on that?
It's still on the list to complete before winter. So we are just backlogged with activities right now, maintenance, operations. But it is a goal to have it finished and complete by the end of the season.
So are we going to do that in-house?
Yes. Yes.
And we're going to stain it in-house?
Yes.
If you remember, I did get the Boy Scout troop volunteered to stain that, so if you need their assistance, I know they're willing and eager to do a project like that.
Yeah, correct. I did receive an email from one of the Boy Scout leaders, so we are in contact. Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jake? Okay, I think you've got a couple more things under parks, right, Jake?
Yeah, so the solar kiln I just talked about with the grant application showed kind of a photo of what conceptually it could look like. And then the last one is just picnic table frames. So replacing our inventory of picnic tables with the amount of events that we have and the popularity of some of our other parks, we have an increased demand for more picnic tables in the system.
Okay, any other questions for Jake about parks? All right, let's move on to community center then.
Page 96.
So community center, we have one project proposed. It's design plans for remodel. We have some conceptual. This year's funding included a building envelope study and discussions with senior center and park and recreation staff on if we were looking at a lifespan of 12 to 15 years of using the building, how can we better utilize the existing space? So not adding any square footage to the building, would be looking at how we can reorient our office space with additions of staff and both departments, and also some of the programming space in the main hall and the lower level. So this would be the actual design of retrofitting that to get through end of life of the building. A rough cost estimate was included in that concept plan for roughly $900,000. This doesn't really address any of our energy efficiencies in the building with the cost of windows and installation. It's a very old building. It's transitioned quite a bit over the last 5 years from the group used private rentals to a programming building for the recreation department and the senior center department. If we are still in that tracking of a 12 to 15-year replacement of the community center, this would be a good option to get us through that period.
Questions? Doug?
So I think, Jake, your 12 to 15 years is a little pessimistic, so what if, yeah, I know.
We've been talking about a public safety building for a decade, Overwood, so forgive me for my pessimism, but we've talked about this building since I think the day I was hired, and if we could commit to a timeline that was quicker than that, I would love to hear it.
Right, so I guess my question was if it's more like 8 years, would you still want to go forward with this entire project?
No.
Okay.
No. If it's 8 years, then I don't think financially it makes sense to invest almost $1 million in the building. You know, a new rec community center, you're looking in the neighborhood of 16 to 20 million. And if it's 8 years, I think, that would give both of the departments some opportunity for planning, fundraising, etc. If we had a timeline that we could commit to.
Aldecour? Oh, I'm sorry, Doug.
I had one more follow-up, sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
Last night, when we had Diane here for the senior center, she had talked about some of the issues that she has downstairs, which I think are maybe a little more urgent, immediate than upstairs. So if we decided to scale this back, I guess that's, she had mentioned getting water to the foot care clinic and just a couple other things, the stairwell. So maybe give some thought to if we only, if we sort of did a scaled back version of this, what would we need to put in this year's budget to
Okay, yeah,
design?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, our biggest issue, I think, on the main level is just how the offices are oriented and how we can, kind of tucked in the back corner. We do have visitors that come into the building. We have kind of two entrances into the lounge room, which is an activity room, and then just space for a lot of our supplies and for the after-school and summer camp program with 45 kids in there daily. It's a lot of backpacks and snow gear, et cetera, in the wintertime. So I certainly can do that. I still think with construction costs where they're at currently, maybe it's down to a couple $100,000, $200,000 to $300,000. It's just, ballparking, but I can certainly get some better numbers before first read from our consultant.
Okay, thanks.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I would agree with Doug. I get concerned about spending this much. I'm hopeful that 8 years is more realistic than 15. My other concern is that if we do spend $100,000, it's going to be a tough ask when we want to go and renovate the whole thing. The community will say, well, we just spent all this money to put in this beautiful new renovation. Why do we need a new? And then it just gets pushed out another decade. And I don't want to see that happen. So, if we could figure out what we can do to make the space useful for you and, get you through, if it looks more like 8 years, I think that would be more comfortable for me.
Anybody else? Doug?
Well, I guess maybe this is a good time for you or Brian to sort of give us your thoughts of what the timeline. Is it more 8 or is
Well,
it more
I'm
12?
hoping more like 8 or 9. We do have money for planning of public safety in for next year. The plan, if that all goes as we hope, will be starting in 2024, which is 3 years from now, or probably 2.5 or whatever. So, but of course there'll be future councils, and who knows what they'll do. But I also, these numbers have changed a lot. Jake first brought this project to us a couple months ago, and then it was estimated to be about $500,000. And then about the time that we got into discussing the capital budget, then RO came back with 900. But I don't think either of those are real. They didn't have a lot really to. They're kind of more guesses, weren't they? Then they didn't really have any hard estimates or anything, so I don't really know what kind of money we're talking here. I put it in, and you know, some of it certainly makes sense to make it more habitable, but I have the same concerns you guys do. So could you address the number, Jake? The estimates, the 500 or the 900?
When we started with 500, that was last year's capital budget, and that was an estimate on, at that time, what construction costs could look like from an interior remodel. And as we went through the building space needs study, discussions with both the senior center and rec staff, additions to the programming elements for both levels, it morphed into, well, this would be, nice to have foot care clinic. We need to replace the stairwell. Could we cut the main hall in half so we could have 2 programming spaces, etc.? Does that make sense that we could have 2 senior centers? Just kind of discussing that transition from community-based, private rentals to full on programming. And RO went through kind of the numbers, and we couldn't find a contractor to give us a better quote. So we're using square footage, construction costs, and what they're just seeing over this year in the construction industry. I think it's going to be a challenging project to get good pricing. Certainly, it's a lot easier to build new when you have plans and you know what you're going to be working with this building and the age of it. We do have plans, but once you start opening up walls, you don't know what you're going to run into. So it's going to be expensive, I think, to try to get what ideally our staffs would like versus what to do in a shorter amount of time. So I do think the discussion changes if we're in an 8-year lead time where we could pare down and deal with what the existing spaces we have. But again, I would say if you're talking 8 years and we're starting planning in 3 years from now, so we'd have to start looking at 25, 26 capital budget for, master planning.
I also have some concerns about splitting that main hall in half, because that is, and I get that we're not doing outside events anymore, but that is our main big space for any kind of event. So I think that kind of thing would certainly need to be discussed more.
You have a public hearing. That's
Right.
our only space for it.
So does anybody else have anything, or Brian, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Jake's
That's
nailed
really
it.
good.
Pretty on.
Okay. Okay, next up is the pool.
Page 130.
Our pool is a pretty standard year for next year. Repainting the pool in the springtime. We include, we have different pumps within the pool system that systematically need to be replaced, not our main pool pump, and then deck furniture, which I believe Marta can attest to, but I think that might be a carryover from this year, potentially. That's just replacement of deck furniture as needed.
And Jake, on the pool painting, that's something that's an activity that we do about every 3 years, is that correct?
Yep, 3 seasons. Last time was done in 2018.
And of course, the pool is also something that needs to be replaced. So,
Yeah, correct. I think when we're talking about the community center, it would be both the community center and the outdoor pool.
yeah, it would make sense to do together.
Right. And the pool will be 25 years old in 2023. If my math is right.
No.
Or 30 years
yeah.
old. Yeah, 30 years old. So we're nearing 30. If you recall, the original pool was built in 1963, replaced in 93. We've done a really great job as a city, elected officials, in providing funding for improvements with pumps, filters, etc. But as we kind of look at what the community might want in additions, some of the changes in accessibility for the pool, and just waiting on something major to happen. You're over 30 is kind of whatever you get out of after 30 years, is kind of icing on the cake.
Any
We've
other?
seen a lot of.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mayor. Just for your reference, we've seen a lot of outdoor pool construction projects over the last 5 years in Wisconsin, ranging from $6 to $9 million.
Doug?
Jake, this summer, we had some leakage in the pool, is that right? And do we know where it's coming from yet? And
We don't yet. We're still in the process of the shutdown of the outdoor pool. So as we get to that, hopefully next week, we'll get some videotaping of all of the supply lines. Some of it has to do with the water. The water table was low this year. When we got heavy rains, we noticed less leaking. So that'll be investigated. Hopefully we can get that taken care of, and it's isolated to a single spot in the supply.
okay.
Anyone else? Thank you. I think that's everything for you. Is that right?
Thank you, guys.
It's quick as ever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think. Thanks, Jake. We'll take a break.
Jane has
Oh, I'm sorry, Jen.
I had one question. So Jake, you said that the deck furniture might be carryover. Is someone able to confirm that?
Right now, we have 8,000, so I'm waiting to see when all the invoices come in for that, so we might have some extra money to carry over for that, because we have 8,000 this year, too, 2021.
Okay, so we may have something additional
Yeah.
too. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Jake. Oh, why don't we take a break here if people want to grab some pizza before it's cold? Take about 5 minutes or so and No,
When
I
it
don't.
when it adjourned last night, I said, oh, good, then I don't have to go home and do that.
Stuff to do before you're ready.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm really happy.
He was grumbling a bit.
Okay, folks, we are back on air.
Yep. Nice video of the dogs.
We're on buildings, and first up is Doug Bauman, who is going to talk about the pagoda. And it is on page 35.
Good evening, everybody. This is a budget request for the possible restoration of the Springhaven Pagoda at Stonebridge Park, seeking an additional $40,000 in the 2022 capital budget. So City Council recently voted to terminate the roof replacement project, given the condition of the rest of the pagoda, specifically the foundation and the report that it was unlikely to be able to support a replacement roof. This proposal would use an estimated $25,000 of the just over $31,000 from the original contract, as well as the additional $40,000. Per the terms of the contract for the roof project, the city is liable for the costs, and I'm still getting details of those from Joe Daniels. But at this point, it's listed as just some forming materials. So that's estimated at around $6,000 just for rounding to get to that $25,000 remaining. Included in the previous materials, and I believe in the packet as well today, was the estimate from Patrick Egan in terms of both the costs and potential savings in his letter, which he estimated the project costs to be just over $38,000 for a full replacement of the pagoda. Building upon this, the request for demolition of the pagoda and potential replacement was considered at the September Landmarks Commission meeting and was tabled. The Commission requested a second opinion on both the structural integrity of the pagoda as well as the possibility of restoration. At the recommendation of one of the Commission members, staff have contacted CMR, Concrete and Masonry Restoration, they're a firm out of Milwaukee, and they will be providing the second opinion. And that will be expected at the October Landmarks, in time for the October Landmarks Commission meeting, where I expect that discussion will continue and that may be a possible decision.
Does anyone have any questions? Alder Groupie.
I know we had a little bit of back and forth about what the potential restoration or rebuilding of the pagoda would look like. Have you had any additional discussion about whether your intention is, if it will be demolished, that you will keep with the original design, or you will explore other possibilities for the aesthetics of it?
I would say at this point that there hasn't really been much discussion, other than one of the Commission members shared that it's not typical that you would do a like-for-like replacement, exactly the same. So there may be some design tweaks and things like that, but I think correctly anything else to add, but I'm not sure that at this point we've got that far.
Thank you.
Alder Wood.
Is it still possible if you had the pagoda, if the Landmarks Commission approved the demolition in October, is the equipment still on site to remove it?
I don't believe, I would have to check with the Parks Director on that, but I'm not sure that it would be. I think that window would have closed. Yeah, I think that we'd be looking towards removal at some point in 2022, depending on weather conditions that would have the least impact on the park. But I think the window for this season is pretty much closed.
Okay.
Other questions? I think if it is there in the condition it is in all winter, we've got some concerns about safety with people coming down there, and once the park reopens,
Definitely.
we're going to have to think about,
Yeah, that's on our radar as well.
it's going to take more than a snow fence, I think, so. Okay, if nothing else for Doug, we'll move on to Brad. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks.
Starts on page 30.
Good evening. All right, so this is phase 4 of the HVAC improvements for the city. A description of phase 1, 2, and 3. Just as a summary, we rebalanced all systems at the library and at the City Hall. I've done full inspection of all of the components of each HVAC system, produced a report prioritizing projects to replace them as we go. And so this is one of the last phases to doing that. So this phase we've had to revise since last year, and when we asked for engineering money for 2021, the new scope would be to retrofit or replace all of the remaining older rooftop units for the upper level, and including all of the HVAC controls components. That includes hardware and software programming, so that all of the new units will run at peak efficiency and serve the spaces a lot better than the ones that are up there right now. So that's pretty much the scope. Basically, we altered it from focusing on the lower level to focusing on the upper level. The lower level, as you may know, is a much more intrusive and expensive project, but also needs to be done in the next couple of years.
So we moved that back a year.
Right. Right. And this is kind of phased: engineering 1 year, construction the next, engineering, construction as we go. So.
Questions, anyone? Okay, and you have one other item, right? The building improvements?
Building, yeah, the building envelope study.
That's-
So we did 2 buildings last year with the money that we had for building envelope studies. We did the library, and we were able to do the public works garage. In 2022, we proposed doing the community center, but it sounds like Jake already had a similar study or inspections done as part of their design efforts. So we are focusing on City Hall, and then well 3. The goal of the studies is to look at not only the structural integrity of the buildings themselves, but the roofs. The roof at the library now is 20 years old, so it's getting to a point where we're going to have to look at doing significant repairs or replacement. And so I would assume that probably City Hall is pretty close to the same age. I think the roof was redone in 2010. So it's getting to be 10 years old. If we're looking at a 5 to 10 year budgeting window, then we'll have to think about doing the roof on that building pretty soon as well. Well 3 is an issue because of the fact that there's solar on that roof. And if we ever had to redo it, we would have to remove it. And the council has talked about what they want to do with the future of the solar project, so that's so that you guys all have the information at hand when you go to make that decision.
Any questions? Okay, and I think you had one more item for building improvements, right? The 40,000 that you.
Oh, the general maintenance budget. So this year, I think we've been through about half of it. There are definitely still projects that we probably should get done this year with the remaining budget, and there are stacks and stacks of small projects that need to happen in the next year and the year after that. So
A lot of it's for large breaks that happen during the year too, so it's not like, some breaks we have to build the large, like 10, 15,000, like boilers and stuff that we've been had to replace because of emergency. That's where that's coming out of that fund right there.
Yeah, for example, one of the most recent things we just purchased is we're in the process of purchasing a new heater for a portion of the fire department. Just the existing heater was at the end of its useful life, and it does have some water pipes that are close to the exterior of the building, and so I'm concerned about freezing. So it's, even though that building is scheduled to be replaced at some point in the near future, there are Band-Aids that we have to put on our existing facilities as we go over the course of any given year.
Yep.
Aldercourt.
Could you explain to me why we've got essentially fund for if something bad happens in our capital budget, but we also have funds like that in our operating budget, and what's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the size of the fund amount. Typically, capital items are supposed to be anything, it depends on the community, but the definition typically is anything that costs $5,000 or more should be allocated in your capital budget. Things that are $5,000 or less, typically it can be put in the operating budget. So for whatever reason, we've kind of established that limit as kind of our threshold. So these larger type of replacements, we put in the capital budget.
And most of the ones in the operating are not major repairs. It's not like, we don't have like $10,000, $15,000 ones that have them in there. They're more like $1,000 here, $1,500 there. That's what's in the operating. These are major expenses that we run into.
Alder Thomas?
So if we don't wish to levy to pay for potential emergencies, do we have enough in the fund balance, give enough surplus in the fund balance to cover emergencies?
We would.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the size of the emergency we want to cover, but yes, I mean, we do have flexibility in the fund balance for.
So we could
smaller
reduce
ticket
those a little bit.
Yes.
And do you have a recommendation on how much we could reduce them? Could we cut them in half?
Cut this $40,000 number in half, you mean? I'd want some time to think about it because we typically have gotten pretty close to that number every year with unforeseen emergencies.
I'd like you to think about it, because I don't want to leave us in a bad fiscal position, but I don't wish us to be levying for things when we have money in the fund balance to cover them.
Sure.
Anyone else have anything for Brad? Doug?
Just kind of to follow up on that, isn't the part of the test also like things we use the capital budget for should have a useful life of a certain period?
Right. That's why some of those
Anything over a year, anything a year and under is operating. Anything over a year, the second prong of that test would be a capital item. So a boiler, for example, because it's got a useful life of 10 years, would be a capital expense.
Yeah.
Alder Quirk?
So for example, if the boiler in the library went, that would be under this 40,000 as opposed to the library budget?
This one is segregated for City Hall related improvements. I think
We end up using it for all the other buildings in total. So, yes.
Is this what we used to repair the bathroom in the community center a few years ago?
We use it for the community center when that had issues. That was like 10,000 or so. I can't remember how much it was. It was expensive.
Alder Thomas?
Do we not have two fund balances, a capital fund balance and an operating fund balance?
We really don't have a capital because you have to spend that money. There's a requirement.
But do we have money?
We have money in there. It's pretty low. We're talking less than 50,000 in there. And usually you have to spend it by a certain date. So you have to spend it, I think, a year and a half is the.
So, but there would be money there.
Yeah, I mean.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Molly? No? Okay. All right, I think we're done. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
And Brian will address the other two items. Oh, yeah, you're going to.
So I put a sheet on your table. Again, we kind of talked about this initially in July, but this is just an update on where we're at with the public safety facility project. So when we talked about it in July, we indicated that we'd ask for your permission to go out for RFP to get what's called kind of a technical feasibility analysis of the existing fire department site as an option for the new public safety building. Really what that entails is from less of a conceptual standpoint, but more from a on-the-ground feasibility analysis of the slope, the utility connections, the ability to fit a building in the existing space. Analyze that from a technical standpoint to see if the building can actually be constructed there that would make sense and work for both departments. That RFP closes at the end of this week, and then we'll review kind of where we're at with the submissions and bring back to you our recommendation on the firm that we should go with to complete that study. Our initial estimate of the cost of that RFP is somewhere in the $10,000 range, based upon Chief Mcmullen's conversations with other firms that do this type of work. So that's kind of part one. Part two, once we've established that, yes, we can build a facility that works on that site, would actually be going through the design analysis process. So in that case, we do a separate RFP to hire a firm to actually design the building on site. In our conversations with architects that do this type of work over the last couple of years, they estimate that about 6% of the cost of a new facility is generally what you bookmark for cost of design. So that's the figure that we've bookmarked in the capital budget for discussion this evening in October. We're proposing that we break that number out over the course of 2 capital budget cycles, just for ease and flexibility, so it gives us flexibility with other things that we want to fund over the next couple of years, because $800,000 is a lot to throw down on one thing. So our recommendation would be that we start that RFP design process at midpoint of next year, so that first $400,000 would be used in 2022, and then that RFP design process would be completed with the actual deliverable of the building design towards the middle of 2023. That would then set us up to be able to do the bidding of the project in the latter portion of 23 into 24, with the hope to actually start construction in 2024. So that's kind of where we're at right now in the process, and happy to take any questions that you might have.
Anyone have questions? Doug?
So, yeah, I'm just wondering about the timing of, so you would, we would first do the sort of feasibility or usability of the site, and then, assuming that's okay, then we would do the RFP for the design, and we can do all that next year?
Yeah, so we, in theory, we'd get the deliverable of the technical feasibility before the end of this year. That we would then know that, yep, we're good to go to move forward, do a separate RFP process to hire a firm to design the actual building. We'd start that the beginning part of 2023, get that firm hired by before middle of 2022, and then have that firm start middle of 2022 into 2023's budget of the actual design of the building. Once that design is complete, then we'd look to start the bidding process latter part of 23, construction starting in 24.
Okay, good, thanks.
Any other questions? Want to move on to the next one, Brian?
Yeah, just the only other kind of additional piece of information that I put on your desk this evening. There's a project description sheet for the San Damiano Community Master Planning process. This will be added in the budget as other sources of revenue, so not city funds that we'll be paying for this. As you recall, kind of our commitment with the purchase of the property was that we would do kind of a very intentional and transparent community engagement process to get community feedback on the property and how it could potentially be used in the future. So this would be to hire a firm to actually run that community engagement process. And the Friends of San Damiano group have committed to funding that firm. We go through an RFP process to select that firm, and they would fund the cost of that firm to come in and run that process. Through other projects that I've been involved in other communities and in contacts with other cities, a good quality community engagement process runs about 12 to 18 months to do it the right way, to make sure it's, you get perspectives from everybody through a number of different sources, and get at the end of that some deliverables that include potential conceptual renderings of what could happen on the site that you can then use for further fundraising purposes and grants and things like that, and then use that as a means to build off of for actual implementation of whatever comes out of that plan. We've at least initially proposed a bookmark of $750,000 for that process. That figure may be adjusted. $75,000. It'd be great. $75,000. That number may need to be adjusted depending on what happens with the RFP process if firms come back with a higher number. But again, that's something that the Friends are fundraising for, and we're not asking for city funds for that piece.
But we're slotting it into the budget just so everything's there. Questions, Molly?
I think, I don't personally share this, but we've had a lot of community feedback about confusion or uncertainty about the separation between the Friends and the city and their responsibilities related to San Damiano. So can you just clarify, while the FOSD would participate in the fundraising process to fund the RFP, would they have input on which bidder is selected and how things would go? And can you give a little more clarification or delineation between roles in this process?
Sure. If you recall, we established an MOU with the Friends middle part of this summer, kind of outlining the roles and responsibilities. One of their many responsibilities is to lead the fundraising effort on getting funds to hire this firm or individual to do this work. They would have the ability to provide input on who's selected, but we do have that separate project steering committee That would be kind of the first level of review of the RFP responses. They would provide a recommendation that would come to this body, the City Council. City Council would ultimately be the body that hires or selects or to contract with that firm. And then staff and the Project Steering Committee would manage that consultant running through the master plan process. So yes, the Friends would absolutely have input, but the ultimate decision rests with the City Council on who's selected.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Doug?
Is this the item that was originally in 2025, I think?
Yeah, I think it was just mislabeled in 2025. So this is being moved up to 2022, but again, it's coming from other sources, non-city revenue.
Right, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Brian. And now we will move on to fire protection. Chief Mcmullen. Page 44 is
Good evening. I apologize for my phone going off. Fire just got a call. So, which would you like me to start with, fire or EMS?
Why don't you start with fire?
Okay, start with fire. I've got 4 projects on the capital budget this year that I'll speak about, and I'll speak about a couple others that I wanted to make sure the council was aware of going into this year's budget, which the mayor was happy to, or good enough to allow me to do. I'll start with the PPE replacement. This is a standard replacement cycle. We use this every year to replace turnout gear. I'll let the siren go back there.
Yeah,
It's perfect timing. It's almost like I planned it that way. Originally, I had set it for $25,000. That's kind of a boilerplate amount that we put in based on the cost of gear. I'm trying to tailor it to what I know needs to be replaced next year, so we dropped that down by $5,000 to $20,000. We have 8 sets of gear to replace next year. Those sets of gear include helmets, coat, pants, suspenders, and boots. So when everything that our firefighters wear expires out after 10 years, we used to be able to kind of fudge that a little bit. We're no longer allowed to. So if we have members that go to MATC for training, they actually check their gear. If it's within 10 years, they're allowed to train in the burn tower. If it's over 10 years, they won't even let them on the property anymore due to liability. So they did warn us many years ago this was coming. It just took them several years to get it implemented. So we're actually in a pretty good spot with that right now. So I would forecast that next year will actually be lower than that. But $20,000 is where it's set for this for the 8 folks that need replacement next year.
Any questions? Alder.
I know the previous chief used to be concerned about not having the right sizes for folks, especially because we now have, thankfully, some more female officers, staff, and so I'm hoping that that's not an issue. Or
that is not an issue. Every new set is custom fit for the user, and then what happens with new members, we get them clothes, and then as they come on in the department and full, they get a new set of gear.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
The second one is a radio replacement. That's a new line item this year. One of the things I noted when I started here last year is we have no budget in place to replace our radios. They age and they're used pretty heavily. The mobiles are replaced on the trucks when they get replaced, but the portables were purchased several years ago. So what I'm trying to do is set up a rotation so we can rotate through them and not have a large expense of coming back to you and saying I need $200,000 for radios and starting to rotate these out on an annual basis. So all of our trucks carry 4 radios, portables. So the goal is to replace the full truck every year. So every 10 years we cycle through all 10 of our, all 30 of our portables. These will not be thrown away. The old ones will get reused. We use them for training. We use them for special events. We use them for, right now we have the last generation of radios still in use by the folks that live in the city. So if we take them out and they go directly to the scene for a driver, that sort of thing, they're using radios that are now 15 or 18 years old. So these will start to get farmed down and we'll get those radios out of service. So this will be a standard replacement cycle every year for 4 portable radios.
Questions? Well, and we appreciate you setting up a schedule like this.
I'll say in between this, my real goal was my capital budget, and yes, this is my first real whack at it, was to try and make it like more balanced, so there's no big spikes in the capital budget, so it's a little bit more even. Because I don't like big spikes. It reflects badly on the fire department when we have big spikes in the budget. So that leads to the next one, which is durable equipment. One of the things that we don't have, and then response to your question you had earlier will occur about stuff within operational budget as opposed to capital budget. When we have stuff that breaks that is long-term equipment. So this year, for the first time in several years, we tested our ladders. So we have to come out and do ground testing. They do weight testing to make sure they can actually bear weight, and they certify them for a year. Surprisingly, I was pleasantly surprised that of all the things that came out of that, we didn't lose one. Those ladders run about $1,200. And that's not something accounted for in our operational budget. So we're trying to establish a fund where if something does break, that is a long-term piece of equipment or a high-dollar piece of equipment, we have the ability to replace that. Hose nozzles, the blitz fires run $2,800 a nozzle. The SCBA bottles are $400 or $500 a bottle. So if one actually breaks that we can't repair, then we have the means to replace it. The laptops that we just bought a new one of for the ambulance, the data entry laptops, those are $3,500. If they happen to break, we need to have the ability to replace that, and that's not necessarily an operational item, it's more of a capital budget item. So we set it at $5,000. This is our first year doing this, so that may actually scale down. I would prefer to see it scale down, but that's what that line item is for. It's another new line item for us.
Questions? Looks like you can continue.
Okay, I will go on to the last one for fire. And this one's labeled Squad 5 Decommissioning Project, and what it really is the beginning of the engine replacement in a couple of years. So we put an apparatus committee together several months ago to look at the engine that was due in 24 to see what can we do. But the idea being in 24 we put this new engine in service and take the squad out of service. So with the grant that we just got from the federal government, that was the last real reason we were keeping the squad, was it had the ability to build all the following seasons. With this new grant, we have enough bottles, we don't actually have that issue anymore. We'll have almost 100 bottles for our air packs that we can just swap them out if we need. So this decommissioning project is to purchase the extrication equipment that we need on the new engine.
Could you step back and explain what the squad
Absolutely.
is? Because Brian and Mark and I took a little tour of the
So
fire department equipment, and it helped.
The heavy squad that we have, every department has one. Some have lighter squads, some have heavier squads. This is what they call a heavy squad. Carries all of our, originally it carried all of our extrication equipment, cribbing for vehicles, the fill station for our bottles, ice rescue equipment to carry all that stuff, and it could carry like 8 firefighters. That's what the original intent was for a squad. When you all approved the last engine that we bought in 2017 from Pierce, that was designed as an engine rescue. So it actually has all the capabilities of a squad, but it's also an engine. So it has more carrying capacity, it's got more compartment space, it carries more stuff. So it already has all the ice rescue equipment on it, it already has a full set of extrication equipment on it. The Cascade system was the last piece of that. So when the apparatus committee actually looked at that, they said, well, if we get the federal grant, we can actually move that truck out the door now. There's no need to keep it. The only time that's actually used anymore is for training. We pull it out to take it to training, and that's about it. It rarely responds to calls. We've had it out twice this year for mutual aid calls for structure fires, and more as a personnel carrier than for anything that it would actually perform. So this allows us to buy the extrication equipment, which would go on to engine 4, which is the engine coming in 2024. What we've got on engine 4 currently and on squad 5 currently is the old hydraulic extrication equipment. Neither set functions like it should. The pumps are actually damaged. There's a low and a high pressure setting. And they both function on the low side, they don't function on the high pressure side. So we can use them to pop a door open and that would be about it. We're not going to do a lot of cutting with it. There's no power there. Cost to repair those would run about $8,000 a pump, so about $16,000. And looking at what our proposal was for the new engine, and so let's see if we can move some of that money forward out of the engine project in '24 and replace that extrication equipment with battery-operated stuff, which we already carry on engine 2. So both engine 4 and engine 2 would have the same equipment on it. It eliminates all of the old hydraulic stuff, which we'll actually be able to sell and recoup some money from. It's still in pretty high demand, the tools themselves. And it also allows us to replace the rescue struts on both the engine 2 and engine 4. All of the rescue struts that we have are, I'll be generous and say outdated instead of obsolete. They were the original set of struts that we have on both engine 2 and engine 4 were purchased back with engine 4 20 years ago. So they haven't been replaced since. We actually brought in several vendors a few months ago just to look at all of what was out there to get an idea of what the cost was and see what the membership liked. I'm happy to say that not only what the membership liked, but the quotes that came back was the cheaper of them. So that dollar amount equates to 3 pieces of battery extrication equipment and 2 full sets of rescue struts for engine 2 and engine 4. And then we would decommission Squad 5 at the beginning of next year. And put it up on Wisconsin surplus. It will sell.
And that will save on some insurance costs.
Absolutely.
And repair
Maintenance
costs, is that right?
Insurance costs. As it is, I actually did not do a DOT inspection on it this year. We're actually pulling it off of the maintenance card. So it's not going to be responding after the end of this year anyway.
Okay. Any questions? Alder Group B.
I just have a comment, and don't prove me wrong with this because we still have the EMS, but I say it every time, I'm a Jerry Stan. I just want to thank you again for your just extremely thoughtful and thorough approach to making sure that you're cycling through equipment costs and budgeting so that we don't get, as you called it, a spike in the budget every so many years. This just looks a lot different, and I think, again, a lot more forward-thinking than previous budgets, and I'm really grateful for that second look and just that thorough dig into cost saving and more thoughtful cycling through of equipment maintenance and replacement. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Gatto.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention this. It pertains to something Chief McMullen had mentioned. So as part of the kind of new public safety building scoping process that we're doing, the police chief and the fire chief are going to be holding 4 open houses this fall to give the community and members of the council the opportunity, if you haven't already, to take tours of the existing facilities, so you can get a sense of, if you don't know what Squad 5 is, you can get a sense of, see it up front and see exactly what that project's going to be. The 4 different open houses are going to be Tuesday, September 28th, Tuesday, October 12th, Tuesday, November 2nd, and Tuesday, November 5th. All times will be 5 to 7 p.m. And the police and fire department and the city will be doing some announcements and social media marketing of this event so that folks know that they can come out and get a tour of the facility. So just wanted to put that on your collective radars as we're talking about it tonight.
Thank you. I think you can move on.
I just wanted to mention real quick, I know you talked about it in your overview last night. I did put a rescue bullet on the capital budget. I just wanted to make sure the council was aware that I'm working on that, which is why I asked the mayor to actually remove it from the budget as well. I just wanted it so you folks are aware that I'm working on that for grants and donations. I don't like bringing surprises to the council and say, hey, I got this new piece of equipment that you weren't all aware that I was working on. So that's why I put it in the capital budget, and I also asked the mayor to take it out. I just wanted to have it in front of you on paper that that's a project that we're working on. So,
And that would still need to come back here for approval at some point, even if somebody else is paying for it.
absolutely. I just didn't want it to be a surprise to anybody.
Right,
So,
take that. Yeah.
If there aren't any further questions, we'll move on to EMS, page 9 or page 50.
EMS, I just have a single project on here. We already had the cot on here last year for replacement this year for $19,000. One of the things that struck me when I started, I've been doing EMS a lot of years, standard of care has changed over recent years, probably in the last 6 or 7 years when it comes to care for our people as well as the patients. And I was kind of shocked that we didn't have a load system in the back of our new ambulance. So I reached out and they installed a power system to charge the top, but not the load system when they built the new ambulance in 2019 at our folks' request. It wasn't a lack on the builder's part. And going back and talking with the staff, both my full-time staff and my volunteers, that was the number one thing that came up was the lift system. So again, I wasn't here. I can't speak as to whether it was a budgetary issue. I don't know that. But that's why I added that into EMS this year, was to install a load system into our 2019 ambulance, and then take the existing power system that's in there and put it into the reserve ambulance, because it does have a power top. It just doesn't have any way to charge the batteries. So we'll reuse what's in 60 and put it into 62, and then we'll put a new lift system into 60.
And this will help them get the cot into the ambulance, correct?
And I started with manual cots and no power cots and all that. So when they first started with power cots, I'm like, oh, this is a real luxury item. I don't really need this. And I hurt my back years ago, and a power load system is a fabulous back injury prevention device. So really a nice system, and much safer for our patients as well, so we don't drop anybody.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Alder Thomas.
I noticed we're not going for this. How are we funding it?
Through fund balance.
Fund balance?
Yes.
The EMS fund balance.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it then, right?
That's all I've got.
For you, thank you very much.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate your vote.
Yeah. Next up is law enforcement, emergency communications.
It helps having Jake on Zoom. Otherwise, it'd be friction not worth it.
I'm telling you, sir.
Tell him too.
Starting at page 36 with law enforcement.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
So there are several items that I will classify just as maintenance items, or items in which we need to do our job, such as things that impact our body-worn cameras and our systems in our cars and body-worn cameras that we use. So if we go one by one here, I'll obviously do some explaining, give a little bit more detail, and pause for questions. So first, being replacement for two of our squad vehicles, one being a fully marked police patrol squad that it has high miles on it. It's due to be replaced. And just as a reminder for folks who may not be familiar with why we replace our squads as we do, is because we do a lot of driving. And thank goodness that's what I expect our officers in patrol to do, is patrolling around. And so these squads are out there fully exposed to the elements, utilized on all shifts, and they put a lot of miles. And so sometimes I get questions regarding the year of the car. Some of us are driving cars much older and are still running and going strong. However, you're likely not driving them 24 hours a day and putting all the high miles. So I sort of continued on my predecessor's plan to replace squads frequently so that we don't run into a squad shortage issues when squads go down or need to be maintained, etc. And so this cycle, we have a marked patrol squad that's due for replacement, as well as our unmarked detectives, one of our two unmarked detective squads, which is a 2013 Chevy Impala. I mentioned this at Public Safety. I'll say here again today. My previous assignment was a traffic captain, and I was responsible for the fleet, police fleet for Madison Police, and we began working to acquire, along with Fleet Services, Tesla all-electric vehicles, and that's something that I very much want to pursue with a replacement of our unmarked detective cars. There are some kinks that are being worked out currently with outfitting a Tesla to emergency lights, but it's very promising that we should be able to get that done. So my goal here is to really look into replacing that unmarked squad with an all-electric vehicle. We do currently have a Type 2 port available for plug-in. We might look into any additional funding to add a second plug if there is one available. However, we can share the current plug that's up there between the hybrid squad that Lieutenant Duman is currently assigned, and you might see plugged in often, as well as the Tesla if we acquire that.
Any questions? Has the squad we ordered this year arrived yet?
I just got an update today, Mayor, that the 2 squads will be arriving in a week or 2. We ordered very early this year, but Ford has been backed up for some time in production. And those are hybrid squads.
Doug?
Yeah, what is a Type 2 charging station?
Now you're getting into some technical questions.
Okay.
So it charges faster.
Faster, okay.
In layman's Brian Cheney Austin terms. So instead of the regular 120, I mean it provides more juice to the battery and a quicker time for recharge.
Okay, good.
Thank you for letting me off the hook with that.
Alder.
Do we have enough squads with the 2 new hires that we are going through the academy now?
We do. Thanks for that question. The 2 new officers that are going through training are doing quite well, by the way, will actually give us the full strength. And so the squads that we have are for full strength staffing.
Anyone else?
Can I drive the Tesla?
As soon as I get to go,
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Okay, let's move on.
So in support of the new patrol squad, fully marked squad that we're getting, of course comes some of the equipment inside of that squad that is due for replacement as well. And so with that comes this next item, which is the in-car video system. The arbitrator systems everything in the squad that I'm going to talk about gets used daily, all throughout the day. And so as you can imagine, touching buttons or manipulating, moving things around. The hardware takes its toll, being out in the elements, even though you've got the windows rolled up. Humidity and moisture does get into vehicles as well, so it is exposed to the elements. But we also run into software capability issues as well. And so if anybody owns a Apple or similar device around here, you understand what I'm referring to, and that the proprietor often has a business design in which you need to update with the most latest model in order to keep the software updated. And so we run into the same issues with police equipment as well. And so I'm asking for the in-car video to be replaced in the squad in which we're looking to replace.
Oh, sorry. I just have a question about are the videos taken by the in-car video, are those subject to the same review and public viewing as, for example, body cam footage if there's a question about an incident?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I think you can continue.
Okay. More equipment to be replaced. So we have 2 radios in our squads. The one radio is it's for the 800 megahertz frequency that communicates with our dispatch center, that communicates with other agencies that have an 800 megahertz radio. And then we have the second radio, which is a VHF radio that communicates with the WISCOM system in Dane County, and we're able to communicate with State Patrol and other agencies for interagency operability. And this is all a post 9/11 recommendation from that commission report that came out about how best law enforcement agencies, what they need to do to better coordinate with one another in times of an emergency or mutual aid. And so that's why we have 2 radios, and I get that question often. We do that so that we can communicate with our agency partners or the state in the time of an emergency. And so these radios would be replacing those in both squads, both the fully marked squad and the detective car that also has 2 radios. And again, these get used every day. You manipulate them all day long between all the officers, and there's great wear and tear in the hardware, but also same concept as to the in-car video. There's a need to update it because of the software updating requirements that the manufacturer has to maintain these.
Questions? Continue.
Okay, thank you. Portable radios. This is a cycle that we look to do every 5 years. We have some pretty heavy-duty radios. I'm wearing one of the oldest radios that we have because I want our patrol officers and our staff to have the best and less damaged equipment out there. But they do take a wear and tear. Just getting in and out of your spots, putting it on and off every day. They do take a beating. If you ever are involved in a physical altercation, obviously, they get banged around quite a bit. They are very, very durable, and Motorola is the best in the business in making these portable squads, and that is why they are so darn expensive. But I can tell you that it's the industry standard, and we very much appreciate these radios. And I've had Motorola radios since I was a baby cop, and I can tell you that they are very dependable. And when your life depends on your radio and your being able to communicate with your backup and dispatch, I would like us to spare no expense. So this is a replacement for 5 radios.
Question? Continue.
Likely what I get asked about the most is traffic enforcement, and so the next item is a tool in which we use, obviously, for traffic enforcement, which is our patrol squad radar system. That unit costs about $3,000. We like to replace those once in a great while. I'm asking to replace one in the outgoing squad.
Continue. Doug?
Yeah. I guess a question on all the equipment being replaced is, what do we do with the old equipment? Does it have any value?
It does, for those who want it. And the reason I say that is because some agencies out in the marketplace may take it and not care that it might need a software update that is not going to get them very far. Some agencies, I think, find themselves in very dire situations, and they'll take the hardware, even though they know it's probably going to last them a year. So it's worth some money, it's not worth a whole lot.
And that's what we do with it is
Yes.
resell it. Okay.
We try to keep our hands on just for parts.
Right.
For some of these, we put on a shelf just in case we need the parts, but for the most part, they're sold.
Thanks.
Continue.
Next is the software licenses for all of our camera systems and devices that we use. So the in-car camera system and the body-worn camera system. We have 33 devices that need regular software to maintain those and to operate those. The software licenses come up every 3 years, and so I've included that, as my predecessor did, as part of our capital budget request. That total is $12,144.
Alder.
I would think that software licensing would be operating, despite the cost.
Brian, Mark, do you want to address that?
You put them in there because it does have a useful life on there, and because of issues with the operating budget. So that's kind of the reason why it was started like that. We can take a look at it. We can take a look at it in a little bit and see where it goes.
Anyone else?
No.
Alder Thomas.
I was just going to say that in a different world, there are things in the police department and in our budget, our capital budget, that we might do under operations. I mean, we batted back police cars, other things. But because of the constraints put on us by the legislature and the limits that we can raise it, when there is an option to capitalize or to operationalize, we will capitalize so that we have more flexibility in the operations budget to do things, give salary increases, pay for insurance. So there are things that could fall in both, but we opt to capitalize them because it gives us flexibility in the operations. And we don't talk about that much, but I mean, we've gone back and forth over the years on squad cars, for example. Not recently because the legislature has put stuff on us, but they really tie our hands, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We could, it makes sense to have the cars not operating, we just can't find a spot for them.
Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to emergency communications then, which is page 51.
Thank you. And if I may, just briefly, just on the topic of the law enforcement capital budget, there were 2 line items that were previously recommended from my predecessor that I have removed, and that being the squad laptops and the modems that typically go in squads. In talking with our in-house IT expert, Lieutenant Duman, we both agreed that we would stretch that out for another year to try to save a little funding and money in our budget, as well as our tasers, which also require hardware replacement as well for that same reason I've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. So we're going to push that off a little bit longer and spare us a little bit of room this year. For 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the emergency communications, aka dispatch, looking for one item, well, actually 2 items. It is the replacement of the quite antiquated 800 megahertz radio system that's in our dispatch center. I'm told that it's likely not able to receive another software update based on how old that hardware is, and that's going to create us some significant problems. So this is ranked, well, it's 1 of 1, but it is a priority item in order for us to continue to have dispatch communications.
Questions? I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and now we will move on to Dan, the big event.
Here all night.
I just feel like we need like the wrestling announcer, you know. We need like the wrestling announcer. You know, like this is the main event.
Starts on page 53.
Make it good.
Okay. So, the way I typically do this, I think everybody's mentioned this with me so far the past few years, but you see all the sheets in your budget book. I have 17 of them this year. And the sheets basically contain the nuts and bolts of the topic. And I'll discuss that, but as I'm talking, please feel free to cut in and ask me questions at any time. I'm sure there's information I'm not passing along that you guys might have questions on, and I can easily answer that. So, Vice Mayor, if you're ready,
Sure.
Take one. So the first item that we have, and this was re-ranked by the Public Works Committee, they bumped this one up to number 1, is our ash tree removal program. Coming back again for year number 3 for requesting funding to remove ash trees. Similar to last year in 2020, or 2021, we removed so far about 117 trees with that money, and we pretty much expended it for the year. And I think last year we were right around 120. So that 75 grand that we're looking at will probably get us about another 120 trees or so. When we started this last year, at that time, we had 673 ash trees in the terrace area. So we're not even halfway there yet as far as expecting removal of the ash tree. So I think we're looking at probably another 3 to 4 more years in the future for this.
And these are just trees that Public Works deals with. Parks has their own
Parks has their own
group of ash trees.
And we do get some assistance through Jensen Tree Care. And this year, they've removed about half of the trees because they're either in power lines or they're of a size that is too big for our crew to handle. So, but I think we're pretty much to the end of spending that money this year. Any questions on that one?
Doug, would you?
There's no money in the capital budget anyway for replacement of trees. Is there money in the operating, or did I miss it?
Yeah, it's rank 7. It's the floor down.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Never mind.
Okay, moving on. The next one would be the West Broadway improvements, Fraser to US Highway 12 and 18. This project is being led by Dane County. It's a cost share with Dane County, City of Mcmullen, and City of Madison. I included a picture. You all read it probably almost every day, so you're fully aware of the condition of the road there. Our portion, we're looking at about $320,000. Dane County will lead this, and they'll bill us at the end, similar to what we did this year on Mcmullen Drive. So, any questions for that one?
Just a comment that everybody who drives or bikes on that road, you can't basically bike on it. I mean, and it can be a shortcut if you're willing to go on that road, but right now it's yeah, can't do it. So.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, we do have the South Winnebago Road Improvements Project, requesting funding for this one. This year, as of right now, we're in the preliminary engineering stage, and we have the October 6th Public Works Committee meeting coming up where we'll discuss the preliminary engineering, and then we have the October 21st Public Information meeting where we'll present that to the public as far as a draft preliminary review. As of right now, we have 3 options that we're presenting to you tonight as well for consideration. Option number 1 would be the road improvements, and the base package with all these options includes removal of the bump outs. We're constructing, I believe, 3 parking in bays. We're including 3 speed humps. We have minor stormwater improvements at Graham Street and at other areas where we're doing bump out removal. We're doing mill and overlay from Bridge Road to Schluter Road. Bike lanes will be included and associated pavement markings. So that's the base package. Option 1 that is up for review includes no sidewalk and no preparation for sidewalks in the future. Basically, it's the base package like I just explained.
Dan, could you explain a little bit about, there's been some questions I know about why we're having to replace the asphalt when we just did this road.
Right.
Actually, it was 15 years ago we did it, but do you want to explain that a little bit?
Right. The asphalt probably could have been milled and overlaid about 5 years ago already. We started having a lot of potholes, not alligator cracking. We don't have a lot of base failure, but a lot of the potholes. And from what I understand, the surface course of that asphalt was applied late in the season. From what I understand, it was the last batch out of the plant before they closed for the year. By that time of the season, you're already looking at lower temps. And, I don't know what the daytime temps were back in November of 2006 or whatever year it was, but I think that's leading to some of the premature failure of the asphalt that you see out there today. So basically, along with the asphalt failure, we did seal coat it a few years ago. So there's several layers of pavement marking on there. So the failures go basically from Bridge Road to Schluter Road. The new bike lanes, new markings will cover that entire area. But the driver, I guess in my mind, would be mill and overlay because of the pavement failure. The second most important, from our standpoint, would be removing the bump outs because the bikers don't use them. Some bikers do. They're hard to plow around. Our staff does maintain the bump outs in winter as far as snow removal on them. But yeah, that's the driver for this one.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
the second option that's being looked at is the basic improvements with no sidewalk, however, with preparation to install sidewalks in the future. This option includes narrowing of the roadway from Owen Road to Maywood. And that would allow for future sidewalks on the east side of the street. With this option, there would be no right-of-way purchase, and there's no funding for retaining wall relocation. The retaining walls on either side would stay where they're at. The road would come in, curb lines would come in, and the road would be narrowed to make room for a future sidewalk. That's if this option is chose. And
I think Alder has a question.
oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
So for narrowing, I thought we were just shifting to the left.
Well, I guess the engineer speak is a narrowing of the road, so it'd be a minor shift to the west.
It is going to be narrowed a little bit too,
Yeah.
though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So are we still going to have 10.5 drive lanes?
I believe they would be 10-foot drive lanes is what they're focusing on. I haven't seen a preliminary plan set yet. I've requested that for Monday. Hopefully I get it in time for next week. So
I think the sidewalk might be somewhat narrower than the sidewalk on the rest of the,
It talks about 4 feet, I believe.
yeah. And the rest would be 5, I think. Is that, Kathy?
Well, Molly was first. So.
That's okay.
Well, I just wanted to I told the Public Works Committee that I would, and you interrupt me if you think I go off on what they intended, but when Public Works took a look at this, because there was a limit on capital expenditures, the Public Works Committee voted to not do the sidewalks now. I specifically said, I am not going to say that you are against sidewalks because I have not heard that. If nobody said they were against sidewalks, I'm going to vote. But they think the timing on it was not good because of the cost and because of other things. So they voted to remove the sidewalks and do those at a later date. And that's why the sidewalks were taken off by Public Works. Is that a fair representation?
And then I chose to put them back in as one option.
I just have a couple of questions, and one can wait until this has maybe been more fully explained and we get through option 3. But we're talking about doing a narrowing of the road, but can you clarify that we are repairing and making full like standard the width of all of the lanes in this process overall? Because I know that was a problem with the original reconstruction in 2006, where that all of the lanes, bike parking and vehicle lanes, were narrower than standard, and that was a major problem and has contributed to a lot of the issues and stress that we're experiencing today. Can you comment on that?
That was one of the discussion points between staff when we were meeting with the mayor and the engineers. We don't want to go back to a 9.5-foot drive lane. That's a substandard width. A 10-foot drive lane is common. 11-foot is common. Monona Drive is 11 feet. But we're planning for 10 feet for Winnequa Road, and we're planning for at least standard width for bike lanes.
Got it.
That's the plan right now. I'll know more once we see, when I receive it from the engineers on the 27th. But I think that was the main directive that we gave them as far as establishing a drive lane.
Thank you very much.
So.
And the other question I have is the discussion about future sidewalks and just and again, I'm not sure where this fits in timeline-wise for tonight or future conversations, but I have a lot of concerns about the idea of, preparation for the future sidewalk installation without a real knowledge or idea of what that timeline would look like and what it would entail. And so if we could elaborate on that at some point in this conversation, I think that would be useful, just to know what we're thinking of when we're talking about future sidewalk installation, how far that would extend, and then what a realistic or a real timeline would be for a project of that magnitude.
I think that timeline would be determined by City Council and the Public Works Committee. I wouldn't even know where to begin with as far as picking a timeline for that.
This was something I think that one of the engineers suggested putting in as an option if the council decided not to go with the sidewalk, at least and wanted to do it later because they wanted to see how the speed bumps worked and parking bump ins and that kind of thing worked. then the work would be, the preparatory work would be done. And this would mainly affect that part from Owen to Maywood, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Where we're moving the curbs over a little bit and narrowing the sidewalk, or the area for the sidewalk a little bit. So if that helps. So I think there isn't necessarily a timeline.
Okay.
I guess it's more a matter of if a future council decides, well, we would like to put in sidewalks, then that work would be done, because otherwise you'd have to be redoing the asphalt and,
Yeah.
if you went with this idea.
Okay. Final comment. I've asked this of the many people who have inquired about different options and solutions for, the reconstruction of this portion of Winnequa. But I think we consistently leave out pedestrians in this conversation. We talk a lot about speed reduction and, making appropriate recommendations and accommodations for cyclists. But I really think that we have not done our due diligence in really accommodating pedestrians if there is no sidewalk. And that's something that I would really like to find a solution for that I don't think we've nailed down yet.
Doug?
Yeah, a couple of comments, I guess. If my opinion would be, if we don't do the sidewalk as part of this project, then they won't get done. It would make it more expensive, I believe, because we'd have to pay the mobilization cost for another contractor to come out, and I just don't think that there'll be the political will to go back and tear up that whole area again. So I think this is, if we're going to do it, this is the time to do it. If we think we really need to save the money that badly, I would say then delay the entire project, which I would not want to do. But and I appreciate their interest in the budget amount. The other comment I guess I'd make is doing the speed bumps doesn't address the pedestrian safety in any significant way. It's not so much the speed of the cars, it's that the pedestrians are sharing the same slab of asphalt with the cars. And so this, getting the pedestrians out of the street makes it safer. It'll make it, I think, more attractive. I think you'll see more people walking on it than even walk on it now. We've definitely seen more traffic, I think, going down, pedestrian traffic going down to the new development, back and forth from there. Question, if there's a 4-foot wide sidewalk, would that meet ADA requirements? I thought it was a minimum of 5.
I believe the 5-foot for sure is outlined in our city ordinance for a standard sidewalk. I'm not sure if the 4-foot meets ADA requirement, but I am not sure what Josh and his team are all looking at as far as sidewalk width at this time. So
I mean, they'd be aware of the ADA requirements.
Yeah.
So I just looked it up, and it's a minimum of 36 inches for a sidewalk. The sidewalks can be wider. If sidewalks are less than 5 feet wide, passing spaces must be obstructed every 200 feet. So we could do a 3-foot sidewalk between Owen and Maywood.
That's more than 200 feet.
But then you just build a little passing space.
Yeah.
That's something we consider. I guess I'm really frustrated that we haven't
Right.
considered that.
Alder Thomas. Did you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah. Couple of questions. It seems to me, Dan, that we're going to incur operational costs on an annual basis if we move the curb over to the sidewalk. I'm not sure how we do with leaves. I'm not sure how we do with brush. I'm not sure how we deal with trash cans. I'm not sure how we do with snow removal. You guys are going to have to handle that. Do we have any thought about the cost of that, or how much that would involve?
Right now, ever since the bump outs were put in, our staff does snow removal on the bump outs in winter. And if we remove the bump outs and we have sidewalk right behind the curb for a couple hundred feet, I'm almost thinking that it's either going to be a wash or it might actually be less in operational costs than what it is today. We would most likely use the new mini loader that we have, and that requires one operator. And if we can do the clearing where we can blow the snow, like one typically would, onto the property, we would most likely do that. And that's going to be about $71 an hour when you look at labor and the equipment charge, if you want to use a DOT rate. If it's actual snow removal where we offload the snow to another site, we're looking at about $161 an hour. And that short of a distance, my guess is we would complete that in less than a half hour. We're already in the area, either between our crew or the parks crew. Parks crew is in the area doing the sidewalks. We're in the area doing the bridge on Bridge Road. So I don't know if that gives you an accurate picture, but it's.
What about leaves and brush?
In that small area, there would probably have to be some coordination for leaf collection with the resident. We have, I believe, about 6 properties in Monona right now where we do somewhat of a coordinated pickup because they don't have a terrace area. This might be a location in that small section between Owen and Maywood where we work something out with the residents there too. Probably something similar for brush collection as well.
Thank you.
To clarify, you already have a sort of a special arrangement for some of the residents on that stretch as it exists due to retaining walls and the presence of other structures like that. Is that correct?
On the north end of Winnequa, we do right now. We don't have any special arrangements for anything on South Winnequa.
Okay.
Yeah.
My last question, and I don't know how this is determined, but one of the other concerns shared by residents on that stretch was having to cross the street if their mailboxes had to be relocated to the other side of the road. And for me as an able-bodied person, that's not an issue personally, but I also just don't understand. It sounded like they had a conversation about this at some point in the history of the city where they either had to have, on your, door or like at your home mailbox or on the street to be accessible to the mail carrier.
I think that comes from the post office.
It is the post office requires that you have mailboxes on Winnequa Road.
And is that something that has the potential to change in the future if the
No. We try diligently.
That's wild to me.
Find
That's
it
wild.
way unfair, but it is what it is. And
Okay.
it won't change, and because it requires more help from them, and they won't do it. It's even when we lived across the street, our house fronted on Winnequa, and our driveway was on Frost Woods, and we wanted to put the mailbox, because if you're on Frost Woods, as you know, they have mailboxes on the house, and we wanted to put it on the house, but because the house fronted on Winnequa, we had to put a mailbox up. It was not optional.
Maybe I just have them forward their mail to my home and see how that works. But in all seriousness, if the sidewalk exists, that would be a necessary change that mailboxes would have to go across the street. Is that right?
No, not necessarily, I don't think.
No.
Well, because the ones on the east side, they're going to have more space in front of their property, right? Because we're moving the curb away, so I don't think they would have to move.
Especially if we're looking at, a shifting of curb lines and narrowing of the roadway, we do have room to play with on the sidewalk with regards to 36 inches to 5 feet or even 6 feet. I've seen it in other communities where, it's similar to what you see on a street sign where it's planted on the concrete.
Okay.
If we're going to have areas of meandering sidewalk in the design, and if, I don't know exactly how the engineers have this thought out because I haven't seen the plan yet, but there are areas where you could have a core hole surrounded by cement for the mailbox post, as long as you have adequate spacing, behind that for a sidewalk. So there's things that the engineers can do to accommodate, the ADA requirements and pedestrian safety and things like that. But I haven't seen what they have on the paper yet, so.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yep.
Anyone else? Christie?
Yeah, I had requested a street tree map from Brad Brun just to get an idea of if the sidewalk on the east side was to go in, how many trees and the exact location would be taken out. The map he sent me, and I am a cartographer, I struggled to count. So I was wondering if you could tell me how many there are.
I don't know that myself. I know the Strand plan will have the trees impacted based on each design or based on each option.
Okay.
So next week I'll be able to tell you that.
Then you'll get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you should have that information for the next time you review this information.
Great.
So.
And then I was also surprised that we didn't have, and Alder Groupie kind of hinted at it, or he mentioned it straight out, that we didn't have bike and ped counts before we started this whole design process. Is there?
We do, don't we?
Yeah, the university project did
Yeah.
bike and ped counts.
Okay, it's just not included in the ad hoc bike ped traffic data, because I've not seen anything in there.
I think we did some hand counts of the bike traffic.
Okay.
And we had some students do it too.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a ton of data that was established with the university project
Right.
that was also incorporated in the back end of the bike ped plan. So I don't know where it is, but I believe that stuff is out there. I know they had teams of college kids stationed at intervals on South Winnequa.
Okay.
I think on Midmore as well. Whatever the typical bike routes are, they do have actual.
Okay.
I know some of us even sat
Yeah.
out and did counting
Yeah,
too.
so they're out there. I just don't know exactly what document you should look at.
I guess I would have some concerns of, the pre-COVID numbers versus the present, because.
Which are probably more.
It is,
Yeah.
it's a world of difference, especially in the biking scene, for sure.
But I think if anything, that would stress even more that we need to do something about making biking and walking safer.
That was a major part of our discussion when we had the ad hoc bike ped committee. So.
Yeah, I think we had estimated on a peak summer day of about 1,000 bikes
Yeah.
a day through that stretch. So it could even be higher now, but, it's on the lake loop, so.
I've done some counts recently, and I was averaging 82 an hour.
Yeah.
So 1,000 a day, it was like a 92-degree day on one of those, so it was probably a lower count.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And just to clarify, this plan is different than the one that was presented at that public information meeting a month or 6 weeks
Yeah.
ago. It's changed quite a bit, so. Dan, I don't know if you want to say anything more about option 3, or if we have you pretty much
Just option
covered there?
3 is everything. It includes sidewalks, the curb adjustments, and all the base construction items. So, Mayor, you're looking for the committee or the city council when they approve the capital budget to pick an option? Is that what the goal is?
Yeah.
Or okay.
If they, I don't know if option 2 is really much of an option, but we added it. To me, it's between option 1 and option 3.
Right.
It's mainly, do you want the sidewalks or not?
Okay.
Yeah, currently option 3 is in there, so you need to do a budget amendment to change it.
Right. Option 3 is what's actually, the number that's in the budget is option 3.
I think I've touched on all my points for this topic. Is there any other questions?
Oh.
All right, moving on. The next one would be our annual street maintenance, labeled right-of-way maintenance. It includes our maintenance for bridges, streets, curb gutter, sidewalks. We are seeking $350,000 for next year. We have several areas already on the list that we're going to target. The Aldo Leopold entryway from Femrite all the way up to where you take your right turn to go into Elder Leopold. That's the city's responsibility for the lease agreement we have with them. There are several areas that are in pretty rough shape. The shoulders are busting out. So we had Strand go out there and do some initial engineering, and we come up with an estimate for pulverizing and resurfacing. I think we're planning for either 1 or 2 speed humps in there, where you get the straightaway stretches. Traffic seems to get flowing pretty good in that area. So they want to keep that, I believe it's 10 or 15 miles an hour as you go in there. So we're looking at that. The mill and overlay, we have pegged for around $92,000. We already have on the docket for next year a joint resurfacing with MG&E, where they've done a lot of infrastructure work. I think it's gas repair work on Toniawatha from Winnequa Trail to Baskerville. Technically, their requirements are that they would have to mill and overlay that with all the work they've done. That was already on my list, and because of the condition of the road, we'd have a hard time justifying for them to do the full mill and overlay. It's going to be a benefit to both the city and MG&E, so we're looking at a 50-50 cost share for that section, as well as Winnequa Trail. They've done gas work there, so those 2 areas for sure are on my target list for mill and overlay next year. The balance, minus $8,000, would be going towards chip sealing. And then I've talked to the finance director about possibly transferring any unspent funds that we have in this year's capital budget for street maintenance. We need to complete a polymer overlay for the Bridge Road bridge deck that was done in 2019. They recommend about 3 years after to do the polymer overlay. I wanted to do it this year, but it's an estimate that we received that requires a bid. It's somewhere around $32,000. So by the time we were in for 21, it was almost too late to do the bid. So we're planning to do that next year. That's if we can get the unspent funds carried over that we have for this year. That is not included in part of that $350,000. My goal there was simply to make you aware that we need to do the polymer overlay on the Bridge Road deck. So, are there any questions for this one?
A question for Mark, I guess. Do we need to do a motion to, when we get around to that point, to carry over those funds, or?
Oh, we are going to be doing a motion eventually towards the end of the year with some other, there's a couple other ones too we'll probably be carrying over.
Because otherwise it just would go into a general capital surplus.
Fund balance type, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't, I wouldn't think we need anything more than what we have for the estimate, around $35,000. So I think we're going to have a little more than that left over in balance, but if we could set aside that much, that'd be great.
Mark, is that anything, the Bridge Road project, is that anything that could be covered by TIF?
Which part of
The polymer
So it'd be for the bridge deck?
for the bridge deck?
I
don't know. I'm just asking a
I
question.
don't think so. I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Look at the project plan, yeah, part of the cost. Something to look
Okay.
at.
Kathy?
Speaking of that, because I was thinking, one of the reasons I've heard about the sidewalk on Winnequa is to get people down to the triangle and to the new park, which is part of the TIF district. Is there any way we can take part of that sidewalk out of that TIF? I mean, think about it.
Right. I know we kind of, back and forth a couple times.
It's within a half mile, right?
It's in the half mile, we just
Yep.
to make sure it's part of the project plan,
Yeah.
part of it. But yeah, me and Brian actually kind of talked about
I mean,
that.
you could take, even if you could take half of it out.
Right, we've talked about this one.
That'd be great. I'm sorry, Jen.
So theoretically speaking, if we did take it out of TIF, it would still be in this budget, but it would just not be allocated against the borrowing, correct?
We'd still borrow for it, it'd just be, the payback would be through the TIF fund.
Anyone
I don't know
else?
if that answered your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay,
Continue.
moving on. Next item would be the construction for the Tecumseh Avenue Bridge end wall repair. Requesting funding to extend the existing end walls. The current wing walls do not provide the proper support to hold the road bank in place. That's evidenced by the settling that you see as you approach the bridge. So there's been failure there. We've completed the engineering this year. What's on the schedule for next year is construction of that. The working also includes redoing the waterproofing of the construction joint. So that's the joint basically where the bridge meets the road and then going into the ground. So that portion needs to be maintained as well. This one's a little bit kind of hard to understand, but I think if you go out there and drive and go over the bridge, you'll see where the approaches did settle out. We provided a patch there this year for the repair. So it's a maintenance item that showed up on our bridge inspection reports with Dane County.
Alder Curran.
Oh, I just wanted to say that, or ask Dan to clarify that this doesn't, failure's not in the bridge itself, so it's not a concern, there's safety concern to go across the bridge at this point. It's
Right.
the end walls that are failing, and so it's the approach.
Yep, the structure itself is solid and the footings are solid for the bridge itself. So the bridge is good. It's the end walls that support the shore and hold the bank for the road that are failing, or they're not long enough to hold the soil back. So that's what we would be redoing.
Anyone else?
Okay. Next item. Brad had mentioned when he was in this chair, the facility study also covered the Public Works garage. He didn't go into that in a great deal. For several years now, we've had, in the main portion of the Public Works garage, we've had several pretty severe leaks in the roof. The guys have gone up on the roof as much as they can and try to seal up where the leaks are coming in. It impacts the insulation on the bottom side of the roof, so we have mold in several areas. So what this funding request does is to do basically engineering or design to do a project in 2023. This will address the leak areas, which is pretty much the whole roof of the original structure from 1986. So when you walk in the main garage, it's that portion. It also covers replacing the original gas tube heaters. So those are 1986 tube heaters that heat the full garage on the east side of the building. This does not include anything for the garage portion that borders Edna Taylor Parkway. There are other items that were on that facility review that are put off to the future. I want to tackle these because we have a lot of leaks in the roof, and it's doing damage, causing mold, things like that. So the funding would just cover the design for next year.
Which is estimated about 1.4 for next year.
And this is split 4 ways, correct?
Yes, I believe.
Molly?
Molly?
Generally speaking, do you feel that the facility, if, these repairs and other future, tweaks are to occur, is it meeting your needs as far as size and capacity for vehicles? And,
I want you to see my smile.
okay.
I could say no, but when City Council approved the cold storage building for us a few years ago, we had a lot of equipment and material sitting outside. All that's in the cold storage building now. For Public Works, the garage that we currently have in the cold storage building, it meets our needs right now. I think it's a good investment. I think it's money well spent to repair the roof. There are some side panels that would need to be replaced, but I think overall, being a 1986 structure, it's in good shape. It's just that we need to address the roof. Once we get the roof addressed and take care of the insulation, we'll be good for a while.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah.
Anyone else?
okay, moving on. Next item would be the right-of-way tree planting program. We're seeking the $25,000 again here. That's pretty much what we can keep up with. So as we stump grind and create new areas in the terrace for planting trees, we do about 2 plantings a year in the spring and fall for terrace trees. And I think we typically spend this money every year. There's pretty much never a balance left over. But
We also have the sinking fund, correct, that you can use for some trees?
Correct.
yeah, is that that?
Right, that's the donation
Yeah.
account.
Yep.
Holly, did you have?
Just a digression back to the potential installation of sidewalks on South Winnequa. If trees are down for the purpose of that project, do they necessarily get replaced somewhere else, either in the area or in
I
the
think it
city?
depends on what the trees are in part.
Right.
There's a lot of.
Yes, fair.
Yeah. And one thing that we look at before we plant a tree, if the canopy above it is too great that it'll shade out the sunlight, we won't plant another tree there. But if it's a location that will get sunlight and the tree can grow and it won't be crowded out, definitely. Jeff does a really good job of reviewing all of the open right-of-way and seeing what kind of tree we can plant there if we can put one in.
Great.
But the preference is to close the gaps in all of our terrace areas with trees. We get probably about half a dozen residents a year calling us saying, hey, can we get a tree in? And we'll go up and look at it and we'll figure out a size. If it's a tree that's going to grow big and there's no area to put it, we won't put it in, but we can put it in an ornamental tree. So I'll probably give you a long answer on that.
No, that's
but,
great. I
yeah.
didn't know that about just being
Yeah.
able to call and say, hey, come over and
Yeah.
look this year. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
we do like to fill the areas when we can.
Great.
Are there still some ash trees on South Winnequa that need to be taken down? No, I don't.
I do believe so. If South Winnequa had dead ash trees, they're probably already down. But there might be some that have half-life yet that are probably still out there. So,
Any other questions about the right-of-way tree?
okay. The next item, last one for the general fund topics, would be the riverfront development. It'd be the pervious paver installation. The roads were constructed in 2019, Inland Way and Yahar Lane. What we did not do at that time, and it's required by the DNR as part of our meeting the stormwater treatment for our MS4 permit, is where the parking bays are. Those hold temporary asphalt right now. We held off on doing the pervious pavers until the construction is done on the current phase 1. Current phase 2 is wrapping up, should be done by early summer 2022. So we're hoping to come in and get this done before fall. We have to pull out that temporary pavement and put in pervious pavers in the parking areas. Along with that, the speed hump that you see out there it's an asphalt speed hump. That's also temporary, and that was put in specifically so the concrete that's planned for that wouldn't get damaged with all the large trucks and things like that. So this work also includes removing that temporary pavement and putting in a nice concrete speed table out there. So that funding is about $255,000 that we're looking at for that to get that done. But this is pretty much a required work based on the DNR requirements of treating stormwater out there. So, okay, any questions? All right, moving on to the water utility portion. First item would be seeking funding to replace the PLCs for the water system SCADA at the 3 wells. We did an upgrade for the water system SCADA in 2012. So the information that you see listed here is at least 10 years old going into next year. Some of the components, I think, might be a little older. We've been working with L.W. Allen since 1984. I think we were their first account. They do all of our SCADA upgrades. They do our telemetry, things like that. I can tell you the best I can what this work entails, but this is IT stuff, and the majority of it's over my head. But the first components that we'll have at all 3 wells is removal of the current infrastructure, the current hardware, removing the PLC, which is the programmable logic controller. That's, I think, where all the software is, and an old panel view. So it's a panel-mounted computer screen that we can toggle through and look at different screens of the system. So the first portion at each well is removing that. After that, they're going to install a new PLC and a new interface to the existing radio for communication, and then install a new automated 10-inch touchscreen. So at each well, this $51,000 covers replacing all the panel views and all the software to operate the SCADA systems at each of the wells. So it's kind of hard to visualize. I don't know if you've ever seen how the SCADA system operates, but it's basically a computer program that shows what our tower levels are. It shows the pressure in the system. It's got so much stuff. I mean, it's pretty detailed, but the entire water system runs off this SCADA program. So, any questions there?
Did you say this would increase security too when we talked about it?
Our security is pretty top-notch out there right now.
Okay.
I don't think we would have any, it would
So
be-
that doesn't improve it?
Yeah, no. But the nice thing about this is with this upgrade that we did in 2012 and what we're doing here, it still allows all of our operators and whoever's on call to see all of this from home. And if there's any emergency, they're able to log on the computer and make adjustments right from home. And that's important because if we have a large water main break and we need more pumps and we're dropping water out of the water tower, rather than take time to drive in, get to a pump house, and then turn the switch, we can do it from home. So we can get that water flowing into the system quicker. That's what's nice about a SCADA program like this. It helps with the overall operations of the system. So, okay, any questions there? All right, moving on to the next item would be replacing the air conditioning equipment at the water wells, at the pump houses. Wells 1 and 2 are in need of new replacements of the air conditioning units. We've been getting by over the years with general residential style air conditioning units. And we probably go through one of these every year or two. The reason why air conditioning is important in a pump house is because you're pulling water from underground. And when that cold water meets the warm air, often humid air in the pump house, it creates a lot of condensation. So we like to keep the pump houses cool in addition to running dehumidifiers to keep all the moisture out of the pump houses. So we'd like to upgrade to more of a commercial style air conditioning unit at each of these wells. And that will protect against corrosion inside the electrical panels, reduce any mold that might be growing in there, and kind of basically give longer life to the electronics and wiring and stuff. So that's why it's important to have the air conditioning. It just takes all the moisture out of the inside of the pump house. So, is there any questions on that one?
Just curious if this is something that's typically replaced after a certain lifespan, or if it's on a cycle as far as across the wells that we currently have.
Yep. Yeah. As far as moving into the commercial category for the air conditioners, I'm expecting we would probably get somewhere around 7 years out of this. I don't know because we haven't done this before. We've been operating off the residential style, and they just can't keep up. So my guess is we will see probably 7 or more years out of each of these units. That's my best guess at this point.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Water well painting. This covers funding to complete interior and exterior painting at all 3 locations. The price includes any power washing that's needed, plastic sheeting over the equipment, prep and priming of the areas as needed, and painting. We haven't done that in quite a while. In 2021 here, we just wrapped up painting of the inside flooring of each of the pump houses. We put new epoxy paint down, and that should get us another probably 15 to 20 years as far as the flooring goes. It's just been a long while since we've completed general painting, so this is, I don't know if you want to call it maintenance, but it's something that will last 15 to 20 years hopefully before we do it again. So, any questions there? Okay, next item would be the fire hydrant replacement program. This has been idle, I think, in the past either 1 or 2 budget cycles. A few years ago, I came to City Council and Public Works Committee requesting funding for this. This will be year 4 of the program. At the time, we had about 60 that were on the list of the old style fire hydrants that just due to age need to be replaced. And to date, we've purchased 18 hydrants and 17 valves. And this funding for 50 grand is just chipping away at that list, and we can probably buy another five hydrants and maybe 2 or 3 valves out of that. And our crew, they have the experience to do the installation themselves, so this is strictly a material purchase, not installation. So, is there any questions for that one?
I'm just curious, how many hydrants are there in the city?
I think we have, not including private, I think we have around 440 fire hydrants. I can get you a more accurate number tomorrow, though, Christy. I can email that to you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. I believe we are moving into the storm sewer. Annual storm main repair program. I am asking for a little more funding going into next year for this. We do have additional need to start maintaining some of the outfalls that we have in the system. So this money goes to repairing or replacing any storm main where it's failing in the roadways. We have I think a few of them this year alone. I think 3 areas where we've had depressions where we had to dig up the road and put in new storm main. We've had, I think, 4 catch basin repairs where we had to take out the old catch basin and put in a new one. A lot of that work we can do ourselves. So this 50 grand, for the most part, will cover materials. If we need to do an emergency lining, this money would also cover that, where we would bring in Busy Sewer or Terra Engineering to do like a small scale lining. But this is basically to repair any stormwater infrastructure in the city that's failing. And this is an account that pretty much uses all the money every year. Next year, like I said, we are asking to increase it so we can start addressing some of the failures at the outfall end walls. Adding new riprap, replacing the corroded end walls, things like that. Any questions on this one? Okay. The next item would be Cops Avenue Bridge sediment removal. This item also showed up on the annual bridge inspection report. It is in a category that we would have to bid it out, and we've checked in with the DNR, and we have to get some permits to remove this sediment. So as you're driving on Cops Avenue, where you see the creek, as you look towards Stoughton Road, we do have a bridge there. A lot of people didn't know we have a bridge there, but we do. It's two culverts that convey that creek. And in most places, through the full width of the road, we average at least 2 feet deep. Some areas we have 3 feet of sediment. We get a lot of stormwater runoff from the city of Madison, coming down the ditch line, crosses into the west side ditch line, works its way through the creek and the channel, and it goes through our culvert system. So we inherit a lot of that sediment. I think the subdivision was put in the mid-90s, and we've never done this before. So this is the first time that we've actually cleaned out these culverts. So I believe this would be a one-time request, and probably another maybe 20 years we'll come back and do it again. So, any questions on that one? Next item, moving into sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer repair program, $25,000, similar to what we do in the storm utility. This covers any emergency repairs that we have to sanitary sewer main. We have used this money to do some small section lining in the past. If we have to rebuild or replace a manhole, things like that, that's where this money goes. Any questions for that one? Next item would be a lighting project, similar to the one that we're doing right now. And I'm requesting pretty much, I believe, the same funding. We have identified a lot of areas going into this year of areas that need to be lined where we have active infiltration, where we have visible cracked pipe, things like that. So we do have a list waiting. So I'm coming back, basically doing a phase 2 of the lining, requesting that money and bid it out similar to what we just did this year. As far as the lining project that we have going on right now, we just issued the notice to proceed today. So the contractor should be moving forward with that and getting the bulk of that done here, probably within the next month or so, that next 2 months. So, any questions on this one? Next item, sewer main repair engineering. This is the engineering effort behind the sewer lining project that we just talked about. We've been working with MSA for I think about 3 or 4 years now, and they continue to assist the city in identifying areas that we have inflow and infiltration, cracked sewer mains, things like that. So we have about 50% of the city done for the review. So this money just keeps plugging away with the review and finding more areas to repair. Any questions for that one?
Dan or Jennifer?
It's not a question, it's a more comment. So, Public Works we're not a revenue generating area, but this is 2 projects that are going to actually end up saving us money in the long run because we pay significant amounts to treat the I&I that comes in through the sewers. MMSD keeps raising the rates on us, and so this is important to take care of because it's in the long run, it's going to save us quite a bit of money.
Right. Yep. I think the infiltration, for sure, lining these mains is going to save us money. It's going to save us in power consumption at the lift station. But we've also found through the water meter replacement program, through the cross connection surveys, there's a lot of sump pump discharges that are hooked to the sanitary sewer system. So our staff is going to be contacting the property owners where we have them on record and working with them to get rid of those discharges to the sanitary sewer and get rid of that stormwater in other areas. So between inflow and infiltration and sump pumps, if we can tackle that, we should see our flows to Madison that reduced, I think, almost by 25%. I think that's about what they have us pegged for clear water. So.
I'm wondering if you can put a price tag on that, like a 25% of we get gas.
We paid, last measure was $1 million.
Yeah. And based on the flows, even with losing one of our bigger customers over the years, Becton Dickinson, I think, if you take 25% of that flow away, which also then takes away treatment charges for phosphorus, nitrogen, suspended solids, things like that. So even though you're putting clear water in, you're still contributing to charges in other areas. So I think it's just a ripple effect if we can get rid of that clear water.
We just had a meeting with Mass Metro. working on their budget and giving us a rate increase. And that was one thing they talked about was the INRC, and this very one of the communities throughout the First Street. So.
I do know that there is an area in town where there's a lot of residents that do have the cross connection issues, and I'm wondering if potentially we could take some of that some of that savings and potentially look at a more formal construction to address those issues. I'm thinking particularly on Midmore. There's probably several properties that we'd like to tie them into the storm drain or something. And that's a significant cost based on our rents for the street. But I'm wondering if that's something we could consider.
Right. I think it was in mid-2000s, I think, where Midmore was reconstructed. That would have been a great time to do that work, but that's the only way, short of doing a full reconstruction project, is to tackle something like that as a separate project. But you're right, there's a lot of, I think, the groundwater levels are higher up there, and I think there's a lot of springs up in that area. So, yeah. Okay, any other questions for that one? Almost done. Moving on to equipment.
Already?
Already? Okay. The first item would be requesting funding to replace the Ford Explorer. This is a former police cruiser that we received from PD in 2017. Right now, the project coordinator uses that vehicle to complete his duties in the field. The replacement vehicle would be going to the right-of-way permit coordinator, who would use this vehicle every day in the field. Right now, he has a smaller pickup truck, and the equipment he has, not enough room for all the equipment. But we're looking to purchase a hybrid model. That's what the funding that we have requested for is $41,700. I have a gas price there as well, if you want to entertain that. The points model system that the Public Works Committee and City Council adopted has this at a rating of a 27. It qualifies for replacement, and the bulk of that comes from the heavy-duty use that it experienced when it was with the PD. It has 95,000 miles on it, 8 years old. So we're looking to replace that, and a new vehicle would go to the permit coordinator. Be more of what you see out there for a typical locating person, like you see in the private utilities. Pickup truck with a capper or a cap topper for all the equipment. Is there any questions for this one?
Do we have a charging station that you could use?
At the garage, we do not have a charging station down there. I know we just put one in at City Hall, was it last year? I can't remember what we paid for that one, but I don't believe they're too expensive. But no, we don't have one at the garage. We have plenty of power there, though. We would have no problem putting one in.
Okay.
So.
Would that be an item to include in operating then, or capital, if we wanted to include that in your proposal?
Yeah. You know what, actually, when I heard Chief Cheney talk about more electric vehicles for his fleet, it got me thinking, we don't have a charging station down by us, but we'll get a price quote before this is approved.
I would think that would be pretty important, Dan, just to make sure that you don't have to come up here to do it.
Right, yep. But if it didn't happen with this year funding, it would happen through our operating budget. So. Okay, I will have that. Any other questions for this one? Okay, moving on. Replacing the 2003 Chevy half-ton pickup truck. This truck is currently used by our facility maintenance person. It's been around a while. We're looking to replace this with the F-350 model. pickup truck, and the replacement vehicle would be going to the utility, and the Ford Transit that's in the utility would be transferred to facility maintenance. They don't have a hybrid model on the state contract for this, so this would be a straight-up gas engine. Looking for a utility box that would hold the tools and supply, title and registration, comes to around $48,700. And that $35,000 for the chassis, that's firm pricing from Ewald, who's on the state contract. The points model system has this one rated at 35, which qualifies it for replacement as well. 19 years old for 22, and it has 75,000 miles on it. So, is there any questions for this one? Okay. Last item would be, it's called the trash pump. Purchase of a trash pump. We would be buying a used one, and this would be our first ever trash pump for the city of Monona, and I'm quite surprised we don't have one because pretty much every other community has something like this. It can be used for any type of excavation where you have groundwater. A lot of communities use them for pumping, bypass pumping at their lift stations for when they lose power or when they're doing maintenance on their lift stations, like we did in front of the mayor's house this past year. We did bypass pumping, I think, for 3 days out there.
Yeah, that was nice.
And we did it with a series of small pumps. What you see, was this included in your packet? Yeah. Okay. This is a trailer mounted. It pumps at over 1,000 gallons a minute through a 4-inch hose connections. These things are the workhorse of any water and sewer utility, any storm utility. If you have backups anywhere in your system, these are the first things you put on site to begin your bypass pumping. So requesting funding of $24,450 to buy one of these for the utility. Any questions for that one? That would be it.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep. If you have any questions in the meantime, just let me know and I'll get you the answers before you all approve this. So.
The Public Works will be looking at the plan for Winnequa Road at their meeting in October, correct?
That is on the October 6th agenda for the preliminary plan review. Yep.
Is that meeting a hybrid or in person?
We do both.
Okay.
Yep.
And in-person location is?
At City Hall.
Okay.
Yep. 6:30. And then any changes, recommended changes coming out of the Public Works Committee will be quickly updated for the plan that we're going to present at the public information meeting. And then after that, if there's any key comments from the public, we'll come back to the staff and you, Mayor. And then if we need to take it back to committee, we'll do that.
So, boy, we haven't heard that in a long time. Mark, when would you, obviously you could, if you want to submit budget amendments before our next council meeting, you can. We won't be voting on them until the meeting on the 18th, but when would you like them for the 4th?
Next Thursday.
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. We have like next Wednesday. We can give it an actual packet. But if you have something that comes up on Monday, we'll just email as it is. But if you want the packet so we can get it in time, that'd be great. And just like every year, it doesn't have to always, if you have an amendment, you decide not to have it in the first run, that's fine. You still put it in the second meeting.
So any other questions for Dan or Mark or Brian or me?
Thanks to everybody for all that you do.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Are we going to continue Zooming?
We're kind of taking this on a meeting-by-meeting basis.